3 minutes ago, the future of the monarchy changed. In a statement so brief yet so devastating, William, Prince of Wales, confirmed what insiders feared for months. Prince George will no longer attend any royal event where Queen Camilla holds authority. No hesitation, no ambiguity. Just a decision that feels less like protocol and more like war. But what forced William to draw this line, and why now? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The words were delivered with precision, almost surgical in their restraint. William did not raise his voice. He did not cloak the message in diplomatic softness. He simply confirmed it. Prince George would not attend engagements overseen by Queen Camilla. That was the boundary. That was the decision. Palace aides who were present described the tone as calm, but immovable, the kind of composure that signals something final. There would be no negotiation hidden behind polite smiles, no quiet reversal once headlines cooled. It was measured, deliberate, and unmistakably personal. And then came the silence. No clarification from Buckingham Palace. No reassuring statement about unity. No symbolic photograph released to calm speculation. Just stillness. In royal language, silence is never accidental. It is strategic. It buys time. It absorbs shock. But on this occasion, it felt heavier than strategy. It felt like confirmation that a fracture long whispered about had finally surfaced. For months, there had been tension between William and Queen Camilla, subtle distancing at public engagements, carefully managed appearances, the absence of shared warmth. What once looked like polite coexistence now appears, in hindsight, like controlled strain. At the center of it all stands Prince George, not as a participant, but as the axis around which the conflict turns. He is a child, yes, but he is also the future king. Every room he enters carries symbolism. Every authority he stands beneath shapes perception. By removing him from events where Camilla presides, William has done more than adjust a schedule. He has redrawn lines of influence. Some insiders are calling it a father's instinct protection from internal politics, from competing narratives about power and legacy. Others, more cynical, describe it as calculated defiance, a signal that the next era of monarchy will not be shaped quietly. In his most recent public appearance, King Charles III appeared composed, but altered. His posture more rigid, his expressions tighter around the edges. A man accustomed to balancing loyalty and duty now finds himself between his wife and his heir. The symbolism is impossible to ignore. When William speaks with such finality, it suggests preparation, not impulse. And when a future king draws a boundary, it rarely concerns only one event. This is not about attendance. It is about authority. It is about who guides the next sovereign and who does not. It is about influence exercised openly versus influence restricted by design. And if this declaration feels abrupt to the public, those within palace walls know it was anything but sudden. It was the culmination of pressure, perception, and perhaps one defining moment yet to be revealed. But to understand why William made such a stunning declaration, we must rewind to the quiet tension that had been simmering for months. Tension centered on one powerful figure, Queen Camilla. When Queen Camilla stepped fully into authority, she didn't just inherit a title, she inherited influence. And with influence came decisions, appointments, access, appearances. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her presence began shaping the tone of royal engagements. But not everyone was comfortable with the shift. Behind palace doors, concerns weren't whispered, they were debated. And at the center of those debates stood William, watching carefully. Authority in a monarchy is rarely loud. It moves through corridors quietly, through seating arrangements and speaking orders, through who greets foreign dignitaries first, and who stands half a step behind. In recent months, Camilla's presence began to feel less ceremonial and more directive. She was not merely accompanying the king, she was presiding. State functions carried her imprint. Advisory circles widened around her. Invitations shifted. The choreography of public life subtly adjusted to reflect her rising confidence. To some, it signaled stability. To others, it hinted at consolidation. Those adjustments did not go unnoticed. Royal watchers observed small but telling changes, who stood at the forefront during key engagements, whose voice carried weight during planning sessions, which young royals were drawn closer for mentorship. Camilla, seasoned and politically astute, appeared to be guiding certain narratives about the monarchy's future. There were murmurs that she had begun offering structured guidance to the next generation, shaping not only how they appeared, but how they understood their roles. It was framed as stewardship, but in a family where legacy is sacred, stewardship can easily be interpreted as influence. William has always been protective, but not impulsive. His instincts sharpened over years of navigating public scrutiny and private heartbreak. He knows how authority can shape a young mind. He knows how narratives are built around proximity. And when the future king is still a child, proximity matters. Insiders say William began quietly evaluating every interaction Prince George had within formal structures of power, not out of paranoia, out of experience. He had lived the weight of expectation. He would not allow it to descend unfiltered on his son. Catherine, Princess of Wales, became the stabilizing force within this growing unease. She reportedly urged calm, caution, emotional safeguarding. Her focus was not political advantage, but psychological grounding. She understands the fragility of childhood within royal duty. While others debated modernization versus tradition, she focused on George's sense of security. Advisors, meanwhile, were divided. Some argued that Camilla's expanded visibility symbolized a unified front under Charles III. Others warned that lineage symbolism must remain unambiguous, that the path from monarch to heir to future sovereign should be crystal clear, uncontested, and free from overlapping authority. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, joint appearances between Prince George and Camilla became fewer. Schedules shifted. Invitations adjusted. It was never announced. It was never explained. But in royal dynamics, absence can speak louder than presence. Each missed engagement added quiet pressure to an already fragile balance. And while the public saw harmony, those inside the institution felt the tremor beneath it. The monarchy thrives on continuity, yet continuity requires control. When influence expands without explicit boundaries, tension follows. William did not confront it publicly. He observed, he calculated, he waited. And then came the moment when observation turned into action, when subtle discomfort hardened into conviction. And yet, the tension didn't explode overnight, it ignited when one specific event placed Prince George directly under Camilla's ceremonial command. It was supposed to be routine, a formal appearance, a symbolic gesture of unity. But insiders say something happened, hat day, something subtle yet seismic. Under Camilla's authority, Prince George reportedly appeared uncomfortable, withdrawn. A moment captured, a glance exchanged, a silence that lasted too long, and for William, that was enough. That day wasn't about optics. It was about instinct. The event itself carried weight long before it began. It was one of those carefully constructed engagements designed to project continuity, a gathering where hierarchy is not only visible, but reinforced. Camilla was presiding, her authority unmistakable, guiding proceedings with the confidence of someone fully aware of her standing. George's presence was meant to symbolize harmony across generations. The image was powerful. The message was clear, or at least it was supposed to be. But beneath the surface, something shifted. Observers later spoke of a change in George's demeanor. He was composed, as he has been trained to be, yet there was a withdrawal that did not align with the occasion, a hesitation in his responses, a quiet, searching glance toward his father. It was not dramatic. It was not disruptive. It was subtle, and that is precisely why it mattered. In royal life, the smallest deviations can signal the deepest discomfort, William noticed. He always does. Years of navigating public scrutiny have sharpened his awareness to the slightest change in expression or tone. What others might dismiss as fatigue, he read as unease, and in that instant, the protective barrier around his son rose instinctively. The event continued, the formalities completed, the applause offered, but behind the composed exterior, William's mind was already racing. This was not about a single appearance. It was about influence. It was about exposure. It was about whether his son was being shaped by forces William could not fully control. Catherine stepped in with quiet precision. Those close to the family sighed. She sensed the tension immediately and softened the atmosphere around George, offering reassurance without drawing attention. She understands the weight of these moments. She understands how quickly a child can internalize pressure disguised as ceremony. Her calm presence steadied the situation publicly, but privately, the concern lingered. That evening, the tone shifted dramatically. Conversations that had once been measured reportedly grew sharp. William sought clarity from Charles III, questioning not the event itself, but the broader direction it represented. Insiders describe raised voices rare within a family so trained in restraint. The king, balancing loyalty to his wife and responsibility to his heir, defended the structure as necessary, even symbolic of unity. William, however, saw something else entirely. He saw risk. Emotional risk, strategic risk, a blurring of lines that he had worked tirelessly to keep distinct. By the time the night ended, nothing outward had changed. No announcement, no rupture. Yet those who were present sensed a line had been crossed internally. The seed had been planted. William's decision was not born of anger, but of conviction, a slow-burning realization that waiting could mean surrendering control over the shaping of the next sovereign. But this wasn't merely about one uncomfortable appearance. It was about legacy, authority, and who shapes the next king's worldview. For William, this was never personal until it became deeply personal. Prince George is not just his son, he is the future sovereign, and William has lived the cost of growing up under scrutiny, conflict, and competing influences. This decision, insiders say, wasn't rebellion, it was protection. But protection from what? And from whom? To understand the force behind William's confirmation, you have to understand the boy he once was. A child raised inside ceremony yet surrounded by emotional turbulence. A son who learned early that public smiles can conceal private fractures. He grew up navigating divided loyalties, unspoken rivalries, and the suffocating weight of expectation. Every handshake, every appearance, every carefully crafted narrative shaped him long before he had the power to shape himself. That memory does not fade. It settles deep. And when he looks at George, he does not just see a prince, he sees vulnerability wrapped in destiny. William has long carried a quiet vow. His children will not inherit confusion disguised as tradition. They will not be pulled into subtle power struggles, masked as mentorship. The monarchy demands resilience, but he refuses to let resilience be born from emotional strain. Preparing a child to become king is not about exposure alone. It is about clarity, stability, trust. When influence becomes layered and authority overlaps, clarity fractures, and William will not allow his son's understanding of leadership to be shaped by ambiguity. There have been whispers of differing philosophies behind palace doors. Camilla, seasoned and pragmatic, reportedly believes in gradual immersion, introducing George to the complexities of power early, ensuring he understands the institution from every angle. William, however, views immersion differently. He believes exposure without emotional readiness is not preparation but pressure. What some frame as mentorship, he sees as premature positioning. What others call guidance, he questions as influence. These are not small disagreements. They are foundational conflicts about how the next sovereign should be formed. Catherine has stood unwavering beside him. Those close to the couple describe her support not as reactive, but resolute. She knows the cost of instability. She understands the delicate balance between duty and childhood. Her focus has always been emotional grounding before ceremonial duty. Together, they form a protective shield around George, not to isolate him from responsibility, but to ensure that responsibility arrives with strength, not fear. Their unity has only sharpened the resolve behind William's public stance. Meanwhile, Charles III finds himself in an impossible position. A king who has waited a lifetime to ascend the throne now faces a conflict that strikes at both his marriage and his legacy. His wife's authority is being quietly limited by his heir. His grandson stands at the center of a decision that signals generational recalibration. Loyalty pulls him one way, continuity pulls him another. And in the middle stands William, calm but immovable, signaling that the future will not be shaped passively. The timing of William's confirmation was no accident. It came after months of observation, after internal discussions reached their limit. It arrived not in anger, but in certainty. By making it public, he ensured it could not be softened behind palace walls. He transformed a private boundary into a public declaration. That is not rebellion, that is strategy. It is a father protecting his son and a future king defining the architecture of his reign before it even begins. Yet no decision within the monarchy exists in isolation, and this confirmation sent ripples straight to the throne itself. King Charles III has spent a lifetime navigating loyalty and love, but this may be his most impossible balancing act yet. His wife's authority challenged, his heir drawing boundaries, his grandson at the center of it all. Palace insiders describe Charles as visibly torn, but torn doesn't stop consequences, and silence doesn't stop escalation. In the days following William's confirmation, Charles appeared in public with the same measured composure that has defined his reign, his voice steady, his gestures deliberate. Yet those who study him closely sensed restraint layered over strain. A monarch trained to embody continuity now stands at the fault line of generational conflict. He cannot afford visible fracture. The crown demands steadiness. But behind the discipline lies a father facing defiance and a husband facing humiliation, even if no one dares use that word aloud. Choosing between marital unity and dynastic stability is not a theoretical dilemma. It is intensely personal. Camilla's authority, once gradually solidified, now carries a subtle asterisk. William's boundary did not directly challenge Charles, but it indirectly narrowed the space within which the king's wife can operate. That narrowing is impossible to ignore. Charles understands symbolism better than most. He knows that limiting Camilla's influence over George signals more than a scheduling adjustment. It signals mistrust. And mistrust, within a monarchy, is combustible. There are whispers of private conversations late, controlled, but emotionally charged. Insiders suggest Charles appealed to William not as sovereign to subject, but as father to son. He reportedly urged reconsideration, warning of the optics, of the potential damage to an already scrutinized institution. William, however, did not frame his stance as opposition. He framed it as protection. And that difference, subtle yet profound, left Charles with little room to maneuver. To override his heir would risk deepening division. To accept the boundary would risk weakening his wife's standing. Camilla's reaction has been described as composed yet wounded. She has not spoken publicly. She has maintained poise. But those close to her suggest the confirmation felt less like policy and more like personal exclusion. After years of navigating public skepticism, she had finally stepped fully into authority. Now, that authority appears selectively limited. She may not confront it openly, but silence can conceal resolve as much as it conceals hurt. And in royal circles, perceived slight often transforms into strategic recalibration. Advisors have reportedly urged immediate damage control. Statements emphasizing unity, carefully arranged appearances, subtle messaging reinforcing harmony. They understand that the monarchy's strength depends on the illusion of seamless continuity. Yet illusions are fragile. The more effort invested in projecting cohesion, the more observers search for cracks. And cracks are already visible, not dramatic, not explosive, but unmistakable. The image of unity that once defined this reign now feels delicately balanced. Charles cannot publicly contradict William without destabilizing the succession narrative. He cannot publicly distance himself from Camilla without undermining his marriage. Every move he makes, or does not make, carries consequence. This is not merely a family disagreement, it is a structural tension between past and future, between established authority and emerging leadership. And the most unsettling realization may be this: the conflict has only begun to surface. If a single boundary can generate such strain, what happens when larger decisions loom? What happens when influence, succession, and public perception collide again? The monarchy has weathered storms before, but this one feels different, quieter, more strategic, and therefore more dangerous, because beyond the palace walls, the public was watching and choosing sides. Within minutes of the confirmation, social media ignited. Headlines blazed, commentators speculated. Was William protecting his son or undermining the Queen? The nation split into factions almost instantly. Supporters hailed a strong father, Critics warned of destabilization, but one truth became clear. This was no longer a private family matter. It was a constitutional spectacle. Digital timelines filled with urgency, clips of William's statement circulated alongside heated commentary, hashtags trended within the hour. For many, the narrative was simple and emotionally powerful. A father placing his child's well-being above palace politics, supporters praised his resolve, framing the decision as a modern assertion of parental authority within an ancient institution. They saw courage in the clarity, strength in the boundary. In their eyes, William was not defying the monarchy, he was refining it. But not everyone shared that view. Critics argued that the move risked eroding the dignity of the Queen's role. They warned that publicly limiting Camilla's authority created an impression of internal hierarchy disputes. Some described it as a subtle rebuke wrapped in paternal language. Others questioned whether such boundaries, once made visible, could unravel the careful balance that sustains constitutional monarchy. The debate intensified because it struck at something deeper than scheduling it struck at legitimacy. Royal historians were quickly drawn into the conversation. Television panels dissected precedent, asking whether heirs had ever so openly restricted access to future sovereigns. Comparisons were made to past generational tensions, to moments when personal conviction clashed with institutional expectation. While history offers echoes, few could point to a parallel, quite like this, a future king publicly defining the limits of influence around his own successor. That absence of precedent only fueled intrigue. International media amplified the drama, framing it as a generational power shift unfolding in real time. Foreign commentators interpreted the confirmation as a signal that William is already shaping the monarchy in his image. They described it as the quiet emergence of a new leadership philosophy, one that prioritizes emotional intelligence over ceremonial immersion. Whether fair or exaggerated, the perception gained traction, and perception, in the modern era, often outweighs nuance. Younger audiences responded with particular intensity. Many resonated with the image of a father drawing boundaries within a system known for rigidity. To them, William's decision symbolized a break from tradition, not through rebellion, but through recalibration. It suggested a monarchy evolving under pressure, adapting to values that emphasize psychological safety and clear authority lines. That interpretation may simplify complex dynamics, but its emotional appeal is undeniable. Inside palace walls, however, urgency took a different form. Advisors reportedly scrambled to contain narrative drift, background briefings were carefully crafted, appearances were coordinated to project unity. The institution understands that once a story takes root online, it grows beyond control. Every silence becomes strategic, every word becomes calculated. The monarchy has always managed perception, but never at this speed, never under such relentless scrutiny, and beneath the surface of trending debates lies a larger transformation. The relationship between monarchy and public opinion is no longer distant. It is immediate, reactive, volatile. Decisions once confined to private chambers now unfold under global observation. This is not merely a family disagreement turned public. It is a test of how tradition survives in an era where every boundary becomes a headline. Yet behind every public reaction lies a deeper question: what does this mean for Prince George's future? Prince George did not ask for this storm, but he stands at its center. Shielded by his father's decision, he is both protected and positioned. Every skipped event now carries symbolism. Every absence speaks volumes. And in monarchy, symbolism is everything. Is this isolation or strategic shaping of a future king unbound by internal conflict? To the outside world, a missed engagement may seem minor, but within royal architecture, presence is power. Exposure defines alignment. When George is absent from events overseen by Camilla, the message travels far beyond scheduling. It redraws invisible lines around influence. For a child destined to inherit the crown, the psychological implications are profound. Limiting ceremonial immersion can preserve innocence, yet it can also sharpen awareness. George may be young, but he is not unaware. He senses shifts. He understands when dynamics change. And slowly, inevitably, he will begin asking why. William's vision for the monarchy has always hinted at refinement, fewer moving parts, clearer authority, a structure less crowded by overlapping influence. By narrowing George's exposure, he may be attempting to build a foundation rooted in singular mentorship rather than multiple centers of gravity. A streamlined future, a throne shaped by clarity rather than compromise. To supporters, it feels like evolution. To critics, it risks deepening fissures already visible beneath the surface, because every protective act carries consequence. By drawing this boundary, William may have shielded his son from immediate tension, but he has also intensified internal scrutiny. Divisions, once manageable in private, now breathe in public air. The institution thrives on cohesion. When that cohesion appears selective, questions multiply. Is this the beginning of a permanent recalibration of roles, or a temporary assertion of control that will eventually soften? The uncertainty itself becomes part of George's inheritance. There is also the quiet reality of growing awareness. George will not remain a passive observer forever. As he matures, he will learn not only about constitutional duty, but about the fractures that shaped his early years. He will discover that his father once stood firm against influence he deemed premature. That realization may strengthen trust or burden him with the knowledge that his very presence triggered institutional strain. The future king will one day reflect on this moment, and what he concludes may shape his reign more than any ceremony. Through it all, Catherine remains the emotional anchor. Her role has been less visible but deeply significant. Stability at home, reassurance in uncertainty, a constant reminder that identity must precede duty. She understands that destiny without grounding can fracture the strongest spirit. By supporting William's stance, she reinforces a model of leadership built on emotional resilience. Together, they are not merely protecting a child, they are shaping a sovereign. For Camilla, the implications are equally enduring. History will not measure this episode by a single decision, but by its ripple effects. If George grows into a king who prioritizes streamlined authority and emotional safeguards, observers may trace that philosophy back to this boundary. Camilla's legacy, once firmly woven into the fabric of the reign, may find itself reinterpreted through the lens of generational recalibration. Influence does not vanish quietly, it transforms, and beneath every calculated move lies an unspoken message to future power structures. The next era will not inherit authority unquestioned, it will define it. William has signaled that lineage alone does not guarantee proximity to the shaping of a sovereign. Boundaries can be drawn, they can be refined. The monarchy, often perceived as immovable, is being subtly re-engineered from within. And as tensions rise, one final question lingers: was this merely the beginning of something much larger? 3 minutes ago, a boundary was drawn. But boundaries inside a monarchy rarely stay still. They expand, they provoke, they redefine power. William's confirmation may seem like a protective father's choice, but it feels like something else entirely. A strategic repositioning, a generational declaration, a quiet reshaping of authority that could echo for decades. What began as a father's line of protection now reads like the careful dismantling of overlapping authority structures that have long existed beneath ceremonial unity. Monarchies survive on clarity, on knowing who leads, who follows, and who shapes the future sovereign. By restricting Prince George's presence under Camilla's command, William has not attacked the crown. He has simplified it. He has drawn a clean architectural line through a system that had grown layered and complex. The symbolism is impossible to ignore. Influence, once shared fluidly within palace walls, is now being deliberately streamlined. This is where the generational shift accelerates. Charles III still wears the crown, but William is increasingly setting the tone of what comes next. Not loudly, not recklessly, but unmistakably. The announcement signaled that the future monarch will not passively inherit structures he finds flawed. He will refine them before they reach him. In doing so, William has stepped subtly into a space that feels larger than air. It feels preparatory, almost sovereign. Authority is no longer only about reigning. It is about shaping the conditions of reign. For Camilla, the implications stretch far beyond a single exclusion. Her authority has not been revoked, but it has not been defined. Defined publicly, defined with limits. In a monarchy, limits matter. They alter perception. They influence legacy. History does not only remember titles, It remembers boundaries. Camilla's role within this era may now be viewed through the lens of resistance and recalibration rather than seamless ascent. It is not erasure, it is repositioning. Yet the monarchy's survival has always depended on controlled transformation. Too rigid, and it fractures under modern pressure. Too fluid, and it dissolves into irrelevance. William's decision suggests an understanding of that delicate balance. By asserting control over his son's exposure now, he may be preventing deeper instability later. He is not dismantling tradition, he is re-engineering it with precision that is both bold and dangerous. Because transformation, even when controlled, carries emotional cost. And the cost here is deeply personal. Behind strategy lies family. A father and son at odds in philosophy, a husband and wife navigating loyalty under scrutiny, a child absorbing tension he did not create. Leadership within a monarchy is rarely clean. It demands sacrifice of comfort, of simplicity, sometimes of closeness. The question lingering in quiet corners is whether reconciliation remains possible. Can boundaries soften without losing strength? Can influence be redefined without becoming estrangement? There is still room for recalibration. Charles could broker understanding. Camilla could adapt her role with grace. William could maintain firmness without escalating distance. Or the opposite could occur. Boundaries could harden, silence could deepen, influence could calcify into rivalry. The monarchy stands at a crossroads shaped not by scandal, but by strategy. And perhaps the most striking realization is this: William is already behaving like a king in waiting who refuses to wait. He is not seizing power, he is preparing it. He is not rebelling, he is refining. In drawing a line around Prince George, he has drawn a broader line around the future of the institution itself. That future may be leaner, clearer, more emotionally guarded. Or it may become more divided before it becomes stronger. Because in royal history, moments like this are never isolated, they are remembered as turning points, and this may be the one that defines the next reign. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.